I don't think that there was a serious cause to fire him other than an emotional one. Because if you look at all the hosts and all the guests who may have contributed to the settlement to Dominion, he was one of the few who said, I'm not putting Sidney Powell on here anymore. I don't want to hear anything unless you can back it up with data. Within 48 hours, he had dropped any notion that the rumors about inaccuracies or misinformation on these voting machines was viable. So it wasn't that, but it was criticism of the corporate elite. And I think at the very top of the Murdoch family, they had just settled. They didn't want to go all the way down to Delaware. They saw this. They felt that it was a betrayal. And then in a heat of passion over the weekend, they fired him. And I think before they fired him, they thought, Fox is bigger than any one anchor. We fired Bill O'Reilly, and guess what? Tucker showed up, and he has the same size audience or bigger. And then we let Megyn Kelly go to NBC, and we brought in Laura Ingraham, and we stopped that bleeding. And we can do that because people tune into us because the brand. I don't think they understand that it's not quite like that. It's cumulative. It's like a cut, and each one magnifies the prior one. So when you get rid of Bill O'Reilly and you get rid of Megyn Kelly and you call Arizona too early, and you go up and down and Newsmax and competitors creep in and grab your audience. They've lost over $800 million in stock. Newsmax has doubled its audience. That 8 to 9 key Eastern time slot has lost about 1 million viewers, like that. And Brian Kilmeade, who's taken his place, is a pretty good newscaster. So I'm not sure they can find somebody like that to come in, A, that is funny and affable and knowledgeable, but B, and more importantly, Paul Ryan is on the board of News Corp, and News Corp owns the Wall Street Journal, so it is the epitome of doctrinaire conservatism. But doctrinaire conservatism is not what conservatism is now, the Romneyites. And so they needed Tucker Carlson to appeal to the new Republican Party. And so what do I mean by that? He was talking about the absurdity of woke. And I don't know where you find somebody like that who has the ability to articulate those positions but is not crazy. Especially, Tucker came from one of the wealthiest families in California. He was an aristocrat. His grandfather and family were Miller Lux, which is the biggest landowner in California in the 19th century. On his mother's side, he was Swanson Food Company. He went to prep school. So for him, brought up like that as an aristocrat, to become a populist and yet know how the aristocratic mind works is very unusual. And Bill O'Reilly had certain gifts because he came out of kind of a tabloid journalism background, and he understood the earthiness of the news and the audience that Fox won. And so what I'm getting at is that Tucker was able to stop the hemorrhaging from One American News or Newsmax or all of the other right rivals. They said, why go to those guys when you have somebody who's more responsible and learned but still can appeal in the same topics? And so I don't know where they get that person, and I think that in the immediate week it shows. But just to sum up, Fox was trying to tell everybody, and they let Dan Bongino go. There's rumors that maybe Judge Dean or maybe Maria Bartoloma, all of these people are telling them, you're vulnerable. There's nobody bigger than the Murdochs and News Corp. If you go on the news and you say things and it puts us in legal jeopardy, or you talk about us personally, we're going to fire you. And we fired the unfireable Tucker Carlson. If you think you're better than Tucker Carlson, try it. And so that's the message, I think. And I don't know what is in store for Tucker, but all of that said, when you look at someone like Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro or what Megyn Kelly's done with her streaming, all of these people have divorced themselves from, they don't go on Fox, they don't go on television, and yet in terms of reach and profit, they're far more successful. So I think even though Tucker was supposedly getting 2 more years at $20 million a year. Given his appeal and talents, he could probably make more than that with his own venue. That wasn't true 20 years ago. It wasn't true 5 years ago. But we've so fragmented the media business. You and I are talking right now. We don't have to go on television to do that. You don't have to be with the BBC. And I think that's one of the messages. The Murdochs are not quite understanding that when you take away somebody who had a greater potential elsewhere and was a precious asset that anchored your whole evening lineup, and you fired him in a fit of pique or anger without thinking it through, you got to be very careful, because you're not going to be able to replace a guy like that.
That's the impact on Fox News. But just very briefly, can you describe the impact on the wider conservative movement? Because as you said, Tucker Carlson was able to push certain boundaries of acceptability. And he's no longer able to do that on such a wide mainstream platform. Yeah, he might get a podcast, or he may set up his own thing. But I'm guessing that will have less impact on the ordinary, non-political, apolitical American voter who might have just switched into Fox News at 8 p.m. on a weekday, than the more active Republicans who are going to go out and search for Tucker on YouTube anyway, if you see what I mean.
Well, certainly the left would agree with what you're saying. They're in celebration now. AOC and people are saying things like, we don't believe in cancel culture, but we got him canceled. That's what they're saying. They think they took him down. They criticize him every day. They said he was a racist. They said he was a transphobe, a homophobe, and they think that eventually they got, for that slot, should have been making hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, but they were able to cut his revenues by 30 or 40% by boycotts, pressuring corporations that they were going to boycott them if they bought time. And they feel that that's a paradigm that now is successful, and they're going to use it. But I don't think it's going to restrict. What we're talking about is, on a good night, Tucker got 3.5 million viewers. And that's pretty good. That was almost like a free, you can go on network news for free and get about 4 million on one of the nightly news. And some nights he had 4 and 5 million. And so he was basically telling America, you're going to pay a lot of money on a cable subscription, and yet more of you are going to watch me than what's free on NBC or CBS. That was an unusual development. But that said, when you look at that audience, it's not that big. And so there are all of these other venues. Are those venues affected by this? I think that's your question. Does Joe Rogan say, oh my God, I got to be careful? Or does Dinesh D'Souza or Ben Shapiro say we can't do that? Or does the Daily Wire, the Daily Caller, do they say that? Does the people on Substack, do they say we better pull? No, not at all. In fact, I think they're going to be just the opposite. They feel, wow, there's a big vacuum now. There's a 3.5 million audience, and we're going to go after it. I think that's the point. Newsmax and Glenn Beck, Newsmax, they're all trying to say, we're the place where we don't censor you. But I don't think there's anybody in the conservative movement that's saying, maybe the never-Trumpers, but, well, I'm glad he got Howard Stern, I'm glad he got what he could want, but nobody else. A lot of people are very angry about it.